Hey everybody, Tim Anderson here, aka Renfill. Welcome back for another episode as we dive into books, TV shows, pop culture, games, all sorts of other stuff. And today we're going to be talking about why I think Deep Space Nine is the best Star Trek series out there for a lot of different reasons. We're going to dive into those today. But first and foremost, if this is your first time here, welcome aboard. If you like this video, by the time you get to the end, hopefully you'll smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon so you get updates for all the future content that happens here. Don't forget, we have a Discord and a Patreon, a bunch of other stuff. Links are all down there. Take a look. Let's go ahead and head on in to the topic of the day. We're going to be going through this really cool IGN article from a few years back, but I kind of want to talk a little bit about my love for Star Trek as a genre. I am not one of those people who's like, "Ew, Star Trek's better than Star Wars," or "Star Wars is better than Star Trek." I love all sci-fi, and I think for me, Star Trek is a very interesting intellectual property. I've liked pretty much everything I've ever seen from this as a property, all the different franchises. Varying degrees of enjoyment from all of them. Uh, the least favorite for me, ironically enough, is the original series. And that might sound like sacrilege to some people, but I know it was the establishment of the intellectual property, and for that reason, it holds a special place in a lot of people's hearts. But there's just something for me, in any way, in any case. One, I can get past the really bad effects to some degree, but it's really dated. It's really old. There's a lot of stuff in there that just doesn't hold up over the years, and it was definitely a product of its time. The Next Generation was amazing. I've watched it through twice. It's definitely my second favorite Trek series after Deep Space Nine. And Star Trek Next Generation established some of the ideologies that carried forward throughout the rest of the seasons, or the rest of the shows, I should say, and also some characters and races that we came to see portrayed very well in other shows. But one of the things that takes me out of Star Trek: The Next Generation is is basically arc storytelling. Like I like story arcs. I like big, huge story arcs. I like serialized storytelling, and that's probably I'm 42, so maybe that's a product of my generation. But I also feel like I'm not that old, and but I'm also old enough to remember episodic television, and that was just a thing up until the early 2000s. I think for me, the show, because I did not watch Deep Space Nine when it was on the air, ironically, I watched it after the fact. The show that got me into episodic storytelling was Battlestar Galactica, the reimagined series in the early 2000s, which led me to Babylon 5 and then Deep Space Nine, in that order. And so I came into Deep Space Nine in the mid aughts and binged it like within a matter of like 2 or 3 months. I was just obsessed. Same thing with Babylon 5, but Deep Space Nine in particular. Um, One of the reasons why it stuck out to me, above and beyond the serialized nature of the storytelling, was the fact that we started to get representation and storylines from beyond just, say, the humans of the galaxy or the Federation. And in particular, looking at Warg and his romantic relationships, I thought that that was just fascinating to see more of of him coming through, because in the Next Generation he was just a character, as opposed to actually diving into the complexities of the Klingon culture and society and politics and everything else. But anyway, I digress, not diverse. Let's dive into this IGN article. Um, First and foremost, it had a brilliant cast, diverse and complex characters, including a lead character who is far more complex and nuanced than those that came before. I absolutely agree with all of the things that are said in this article, which is why I used it sort of as my root basis for my own video here. The fact that he was like the first black lead in a Star Trek show, not to mention it was at a time when the riots had been going on in Los Angeles. For those of you who don't remember this, that was when I was a teenager, early teenager, and that stuff was scary. And for them to have the balls, so to speak, to put a black man as a lead in the show just showed how willing Star Trek was at the time to push the boundaries. But we also got, and I think this is in here somewhere. I mean, Kira's okay, but Jadzia Dax played by Terry Farrell, is a character that struck out to me because here's a character who's lived a long time and has played multiple different roles over the years. She's been a man, she's been a woman, and at this point in time, that complexity and that background brings a certain maturity to the character that is lacking in a lot of the others that we see on the station. So it was also the first to sort of push the boundaries of what was and wasn't acceptable in terms of like trans representation to a degree. I'm not saying that this was a trans character because they were not. She was not. It's just that she changed sexes over the years, and so it was very interesting because at one point she would be a woman, another point she would be a man, so on and so forth. It was very interesting how that played out, and also with Dr. Bashir, played by Alexander Siddig, who, by the way, is brilliant in everything he ever does. I love him as an actor. Um, Playing a British man of presumably Indian or Middle Eastern descent. So they were playing on the tropes of sort of British society here as well. So a lot of good stuff here. But the storylines for me were the thing that made Deep Space Nine the most important component because we had storylines that started in season one, and especially as they started in the pilot episode and didn't actually culminate until the series finale. So it really created this sense of completion and also a sense of completionism, so to speak, as well, where I knew going into it as I was watching the show that I was getting deeper and deeper and deeper into these characters, getting to know them more, getting to understand how they worked, their relationships, so on and so forth. Again, the relationship between Warg and Jetsia is just mm, so good in this show. A little bit of the one thing I don't like, I'm not a big fan of the prophesied one, and you definitely had that happening with Benjamin Sisko being sort of the prophesied one, and that was sort of not my favorite part of it. The Dominion War is interesting, but I think for me the complexities between the Bjorns and um, why am I blanking on the name of the bad guys? Not the Maquis, of course. We'll get to that in a minute because my brain is having a moment here. Um, anyway, the war episode is okay. Like I didn't care for the Dominion stuff as much as some of the other components that were going on, but it was definitely um, there was a big component here with the Jem'Dar and all of the Dominion, and the fact that it was basically the Federation, but sort of in a different way. Um, Cardassians, that is the Bajoran and Cardassian conflict was great. We got to know more about the Ferengi as a race in this show, and the complexities of living on a space station. Which, again, this was something that comes into play in Babylon 5. There's a lot of rumors about whether or not Deep Space Nine took Straczynski's pitch idea and riffed on it. Who cares? We still had two great shows. Um, but there's a lot going on here. And then getting into the drug addiction with the Ketracel White and the founders, and we learn about the shapeshifters and all this sort of mind control and brainwashing going on. And the fact that Cisco is presented as sort of an anti-hero, with the Enterprise presented as a flawed entity, which was something that had not shown up that much in previous shows, because the Federation was always sort of shown as this like perfection, the utopia that humanity could evolve towards. And while there definitely were utopian elements, there was also still a core in that which was flawed because it was humanity, and humans are always flawed. Oh man, section 31. We get the first aspects of section 31 in here, as I remember. So much going on here. Eh, Honestly, I've watched this through twice now. I could easily do Deep Space Nine a third time just because of how much fun I had watching this show. Because as much as we do get to see the inner workings of people living together on a space station, we get to see all of the elements that I talked about and that are shown in that IGN article, which I would highly recommend people go dig into that in their spare time. I think most people who are watching this have probably already watched Deep Space Nine, so cool. But if you haven't, if you're on the off chance that you haven't seen this before, dig in. I mean, it's been out forever. It's 30 some years old at this point. Um, so good. so good, and it's well worth your time. And yeah, there's always going to be a kernel of awesomeness in every Star Trek show you watch, but this to me was like the peak of Star Trek, and it's worth rewatching again and again over the years. If you made it to the end and you like this video, hopefully you will grace this video with a like, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon so you get updates like this in the future. And don't forget, you can join our Discord, links are down below. If you want to support the channel, you can either join as a member or you can head on over to the Patreon page where my brother and my wife and I are building the fantastical world of the Weave and the Void through a variety of different projects. Check all that stuff out. I will see everybody in the next episode. Stay safe.